Hello guys, this is John Kalam from Kuhol Garage, and I'm here to make a video to share about certain things that we have learned about the Toyota C52 transmission. The Toyota C series transmission is a common manual transmission found in a myriad of Toyota economy cars from at least the 80s till even the present. It was fitted alongside many Toyota four-cylinder engines, such as, but definitely not limited to, the 4A FE, 4A GE, 4E FTE, 1NZ FE, and even the 1NR and 2NR FE. There are several iterations of the C series manual transmissions that could be found in several cars and in several engines. You can find them from 4 gears to 6 forward gears. We will focus on one of the performance 5-speed variants, which is the C52 model. The C52 transmission has the following attributes for performance application. So number one, it has a tall first gear. Number two, it has a shorter fifth gear. There is a choice of final drive ratio options from OEM spec. There is an option for a limited slip differential as an OEM option. Number five, it's cheap to buy. It has a cheap acquisition cost. Number six, the availability of spare parts for repairs. You have a choice of aftermarket final drives and limited slip differentials depending on your motorsport application. However, this transmission has one flaw. It cannot handle a lot of torque. The C52 transmission may not be appropriate for those wanting crazy turbocharged or supercharged power from their power plants. Since we are currently playing around with the Corolla platform in one shape or form, it was very important for us to take a look at what options are there to maximize the powertrains that are commonly available for the Corollas and whatnot and adjacent platforms. The C52 transmission has a long first gear that's more in tune with performance and sporting needs over the usual shorter first gear that other models in the C series transmission family have. With the other economy platforms out there, usually their first gears kind of short, usually at 3.5, 3.6, 3.4. It's basically easier to launch the car from a standstill if you have a relatively short first gear ratio. But for a performance application, or if you care about 0 to 100 kilometers per hour acceleration times, you want the first and second gear that is, number one, closer to each other, and number two, most likely a first gear that is relatively tall as in relation to second gear, because when you want to shift towards second, you don't want the engine revs to drop as much. You want to keep the torque band, the power band of the engine to as close as within that range as possible in order for you to gain the maximum acceleration factor that you have, even though you have a diminutive engine. For most of the parking lot racing that we do here in the Philippines, we usually, our maximum gears, usually we only play until second gear, and the third gear is very rarely reached unless there's really a long straight, or if the venue is really big to warrant higher speeds reaching third gear. So usually third gear is any speed above 100 kilometers per hour. In the racing that we do, to reach 100 kilometers per hour is like a crazy speed already, because we all race in these very tight parking lot environments. And we don't have much space here in the urban setting for these parking lot races as we do them here in the Greater Manila area in the Philippines. Okay, so we spend the majority of our time in first gear, and of course a little bit of time in second to reach about 80, maybe 90, maybe 100 kilometers per hour. But that's really a fast speed already, a fast velocity already. But if you have a shorter gear in first, that means you'll be very much accelerating in first only a short time, and then you will be in second, which is usually a way longer gear than first, and would have less acceleration on that gear. And also, if you are already approaching a turn, if you're on second and if that turn, and usually most turns are taken at first gear, that means you have to downshift to first gear. So you have to shift up to second and then downshift back to first. You have to learn how to heel toe or just jam the shifter to first and let it unsettle the car a little bit. So it takes up your mental time, your mental acuity. It takes up also literal time to upshift and downshift. Those are actions that uh, I'm not saying it's a waste of time, but you have to allot time to it. Your race session is only 60 seconds, 70 seconds. If you could prepare your car already in such a way that you would shift less, and that will just make you focus as a driver to just tackle the turn as best as possible with making the less mistakes as possible. So if you are preparing your own car and you are starting with a relatively clean slate in a sense, if you're able to just rely on whatever ratios that are already provided by the OEM and it's already appropriate, why not just use that? Using a C52 transmission will allow you to have a relatively longer first gear. So you may spend a lot more time in first gear, and then that would reduce your need to upshift to second in many a situation. But for our use case in parking lot racing, slalom, autocross, gymkhana, here in the Philippines, in the Greater Manila area, where we don't have that much space, a tall first gear really helps. The rest of the gears are practically similar to other C series transmissions, right? If you compare the C52 with the other C series transmissions, the rest of the gears have similar ratios to each other, more or less, all right? More or less. Apart from fifth gear, which is in the C52 a touch shorter, right? This enables more acceleration in top gear. Of course, with the expense of fuel economy, and also at the expense of top speed, and also at the expense of comfort. If you're just cruising at 100 kilometers per hour, 90 kilometers per hour, you put it in fifth gear, you want it as low an RPM as possible for the best fuel economy and also for the best comfort. You don't want a buzzing engine while you don't want it at 90 100 kilometers per hour and bothering you with that incessant droning and vibration that high RPM entails. So you kind of want, as they say, a really proper overdrive gear as a fifth gear. You can always replace fifth gear. It's not so difficult to do in these transmissions because you don't have to break apart the entire transmission to change fifth gear. It's fifth gear is located at the bell end. It's not the bell housing; it's on the other end of the transmission. So it's I don't think you can do it in the car. I think you still have to bring down the transmission, but at least you don't have to break apart the whole assembly to replace things. And you can find fifth gear at other C-series transmissions, so you get that longer 0.7 something fifth, if that's what you desire. But for motorsport application, maybe the shorter fifth would be good. As provided by Toyota, there are actually three choices of final drives in these C52 transmissions. Okay, you have 3.722, 4.058, and the shortest is 4.312. The shorter ratio, 4.312, will provide the best acceleration among the available OEM choices. The 3.722 would be a good economy option. Usually, the 3.722 is fitted in the 4E FTE Starlets transmission for that turbocharged engine because it has torque that negates the need for shorter final drive. So that's a good economy gear ratio. And if you really, really want to maximize your top speed on first gear, having a long final drive, 3.722 should be the ticket for that. But if you want the best compromise between the two extremes, there's of course the 4.058. And the 4.058 may be the default choice for you buying the C52 transmission, which I will explain shortly. All right, so the C52, this is not the only good transmission option in the lineup of C series transmissions. Okay, there's they say better transmission, which is the C56. All right, and the market values really do note the desirability of the C56. If you look at the minute details, the C56 has ratios that are again practically the same as a C52, with the exception of a third and fourth gear that is closer to each other as compared to the C52. So what that entails is slightly better spacing of gear ratios for again better performance as you roll through all the gears. But in my opinion, the difference is minor enough to warrant just sticking to the C52, especially if you're on a budget. Or if you're planning to modify the transmission anyway, rather than be pedantic on picking the C56, you can always make the final drive shorter to negate the need for the third and fourth gears. How cheap can you buy C52 transmission? We don't talk about money here, okay? Let me just say that they're not very expensive. C52 transmission, the cheap one, which is probably already appropriate for most applications, for street applications. It's not that expensive. It's not that hard to acquire. You just have to acquire the right one. If you just want to acquire the cheapest, best transmission coming from a big body Toyota Corolla fitted with a 4AFE engine. So basically, any big body GLI variant will have this transmission, and that transmission will have a 4.058 final drive. How do I know this? I have acquired two parts transmissions from the big body GLI, which we use to fix up other C series transmissions. Having been able to count personally the final drive ratio inside the transmission, I can verify here on this video that the big body GLI transmission is a C52 with the proper first gear and with a 4.058 final. If you want the shorter final drive, you have to acquire one coming from a silver top 4AGE engine. With the silver top, you also may be able to get a C56. So it's a crapshoot of what you will be able to get, but basically if you get a silver top, which also comes from the AE101 big body Corolla generation, you will most likely get a short final drive, 4.312, either with a C52 or C56. If you want the 3.722, I think in my experience, but I may be wrong, you will find that behind together with a 4E FTE engine. So the bell housing is different from the A series engine. So if you're planning to run a 3.722 with a 4A FE or 4A GE, you have to replace the bell housing. But if you have a 1NZ engine, which our Project Rally Corolla has, so we have a 1NZ engine on that car, the only variant that has the C52 from factory, based on research, which may be wrong because it's the internet, the 1NZ turbo engine, 1NZ FET, that is said to have the C52 transmission. Don't worry, if you really want a C52 on your 1NZ engine, you can swap over you can remove the bell housing of your existing C52 and replace it with one from a 1NZ manual transmission or even a 2NZ manual transmission. Here in the Philippines, and I'm sure in even other countries, the more popular option is the 2NZ 1.3 liter engine. And those engines, since they're the base model engines, they will have the base model transmission, which is the manual transmission. That those would be your source for the appropriate bell housing. If you are going to put a C52 behind a 1NZ or a 2NZ. The most difficult part is not finding the part or not finding the bell housing, but installing it, because breaking apart the transmission is not for the faint-hearted. Take it to the pros. That is my honest suggestion. The C52 and the C56, all right, were optionally available in Japan with a limited slip helical style differential. If your transmission is not equipped with an LSD, the aftermarket has you covered. You can buy. But if you're pretty much driving your car in a street, you don't need a limited slip diff. If you're planning to race the car, the benefit of an LSD, you're able to torque vector the car, meaning you can use the accelerator pedal to torque steer your car towards or inside the corner. If you're rallying, if you're already sideways, you can mash on the gas for your car to travel towards the direction that your steering wheel is. Given that it's called a limited slip differential, it limits slip due to excess power applied. So in loose surface, in wet weather, in high-powered engines, a limited slip differential really will help put as much power to the ground as possible. Those benefits are not without their issues, especially if you're running clutch-type differentials. Clutch-type differentials are aggressive. Depending on the setup of the differential, they may also affect handling of your car, even though you're not applying power. So the best bet usually for street or amateur motorsport participants, those involved in parking lot racing, the best differential is the helical differential, the OEM differential that comes with these transmissions optionally, or an aftermarket helical differential. Okay, you can find aftermarket differentials easy for this C52 transmission. Okay, you can buy from Japan, usually clutch type, Kaas or Cusco. You can buy from Taiwan, M Factory. You can buy from UK. My favorite brand from the UK is Quaif. Or you can just look for somebody selling off an OEM helical diff. It's not difficult to find an LSD. I mean, even the local Vios Cup cars that race here in the One Make Race series, all of them are fitted with TRD LSDs. If you have enough budget, it's not that difficult to source a limited slip diff. In our neck of the woods, Toyotas are very popular. Toyota has sold a lot of these of their cars, and by extension, there are a lot of spare parts for their manual transmissions. And they have a factory here in the Philippines making these transmissions here. Toyota parts in the Philippines are cheap and plentiful, and cheap is always good, and easily sourced is very good, especially if you are having a proper motorsport program. If you cannot find the parts, you cannot race. All right? That's basic as that. Going with a part source, or a platform with a lot of parts is very critical if you are really, you want to race as much as possible. You cannot afford downtime. Utilizing a platform that has a lot of parts available locally, you don't have to source all from halfway across the world to get the parts that you need. That's always the best bet. And the good thing about the C series transmissions, you want to go further than OEM, you can definitely go further by picking your own final drive ratios, and of course, installing an LSD. But final drives, you can pick from M Factory from Taiwan. They have a choice of final drives for this transmission. The very, very, very short ones are probably good only for drag racing and maybe a bit of rally. But when picking a final drive, you have to know or determine the maximum top speed that your car can really manage to achieve. Fifth gear, on these transmissions can get you 240, 250 kilometers per hour if you base it on gearing. But it's not necessarily the case that you'll be able to really get your car on those very, very high speeds, because you're going to be power limited and you'll also be drag limited. So you kind of have to determine a proper top speed for your car that you can reasonably reach in the racetrack or course that you are. You can always set a top speed of 180 to 200 usually. I think that's plenty enough for the big tracks that we have here, Batangas, Clark. We do not know how strong the C52 transmission is. And when I say strong, it means that what's the maximum torque capacity that this transmission can handle. I have no idea, and I haven't researched, nor do I care, because that's not in the purvey of what we need the transmission for. We need the transmission for basically a low torque engine, which is a 4AG E16 valve. We're not gonna turbocharge it. Even though the engine that we have is a 4AGZE, we're not gonna turbocharge or supercharge that engine. We're gonna keep it naturally aspirated, 16 valve for that noise. So for us, we don't care how powerful, I mean how strong the transmission is. But for others, those who are turbocharging, supercharging, or turbo supercharging their 4A G16 valve, or making a crazy 1NZ motor or whatever your platform engine that the C52 is applicable at, I don't know how strong the transmission is, and I don't know how long it will last at your power level. If you're really going for 300, 350, 400 horsepower, I have no idea. No clear idea. However, we can take it from Toyota itself that the C-series transmissions are weak, right? Especially with forced induction in mind. Because the 4AGZE, the supercharged version of the 4AGE 16 valve, that did not come with the C series transmission. It came with an Echo series transmission instead of the Charlie series. Right, that transmission, the E series, is usually fitted to bigger engines like the 3SGE and even some of the V6 engines. So it may stand to reason that if Toyota did not choose to put the Charlie transmission in their 4AGZE supercharged engine, that maybe the C52 is not that strong as far as the OEM is concerned. But for our application, we don't really care. I think our transmission will last as long as we wish. So basically, that's it for this video, where we took a deep dive in the C52 transmission. Hopefully, this information will also be relevant. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask your questions in the comment section. If you have any constructive criticisms, and I do say constructive, not destructive, please also tell them. Feel free to correct us also in the comments. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Hope you learned much, and I hope you do appreciate this. I hope to see you guys on the next videos. Ciao.